The last week of military training should have felt triumphant. I'd made it through the physical stuff, the mental games, and all those drills meant to tear us down before building us back up. Instead, I got called away on a Wednesday afternoon, right in the middle of a routine exercise. "Anderson, office, now." I walked away from my unit, boots crunching across the packed dirt of the training yard. The other men looked at me curiously. Getting pulled from drills usually meant trouble. My stomach knotted as I tried to remember if I'd done anything wrong lately. Nothing major came to mind. The administrative building was away from the training grounds, with plain government-style architecture that didn't match the rough terrain around the base. Inside, the cold air conditioning made me shiver in my sweaty uniform. The secretary barely looked up, just pointed down the hallway. "Third door on the right. They're waiting." I knocked twice on the door before walking into a room that smelled like coffee and paper. A man I'd never seen before sat behind the desk. He had a major's insignia on his super clean uniform. His face was tough and emotionless. "Specialist James Anderson." He didn't phrase it as a question. "Major William Taylor." He didn't stand or offer his hand. Instead, he gestured to the chair across from him. A manila folder lay open on the desk between us, my service photo paperclip to the top sheet. I remained standing until he gave an impatient flick of his fingers. "Sit." I sat. "Your file makes for interesting reading, Anderson. BS in physics from MIT, Masters in Mechanical Engineering, 3 published papers on quantum computing applications before you enlisted." Taylor flipped a page. "Care to explain why someone with your credentials chose to join the Army rather than pursue a comfortable research position?" The question sounded rehearsed, as if my answer didn't actually matter. Still, I gave him the truth. "Student loans, sir. The military offered debt forgiveness." "Patriotism didn't factor in?" "It did, sir, but I'd be lying if I said it was my primary motivation." I saw his mouth almost smile for a second. Gone so fast I might have imagined it. "Honesty. Refreshing." He closed the folder. "Your instructors note that you follow orders but ask too many questions. They call it a character flaw. I see it differently." The ceiling vent pushed cool air against the back of my neck. Outside, through the narrow window, soldiers marched in formation across the yard. I'd be with them if not for whatever this was. "Sir, may I ask why I'm here?" "You've been selected for reassignment." Taylor's eyes locked onto mine. "Effective immediately. Special project highly classified. Your technical background makes you uniquely qualified." "What kind of project, sir?" "That information is compartmentalized. You'll receive details on a need-to-know basis." He slid a document across the desk. "Sign this." I read through the dense text. A non-disclosure agreement with more legal clauses than I'd ever seen, threatening everything from court-martial to treason charges for disclosure. "Do I have a choice, sir?" "There's always a choice, Anderson." Taylor's voice hardened. "But I'll be frank, we selected you specifically. Refusing would waste military resources and result in a less than optimal performance evaluation. Your future assignments would reflect that. Not a choice at all then." I signed. 2 days later, a Black Hawk helicopter carried me over stretches of Nevada desert that all looked the same, endless plains of sand and scrub interrupted by jagged mountain ridges. The pilot and co-pilot hadn't spoken a word since takeoff. Through the headset, I heard only flight chatter, technical terms and coordinates that told me nothing about our destination. The helicopter banked suddenly, descending toward what looked like an ordinary military outpost with single-story buildings behind a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. But as we dropped lower, I saw the difference. The security perimeter stretched way beyond what the visible buildings would need, covering large sections of empty desert. We touched down on a helipad marked only with a simple H. No unit designations, no base name. Taylor waited beside a Humvee, his uniform somehow unwrinkled even with the rotor wash blowing everything around. "Welcome to Facility 6, he said once the rotors slowed enough for conversation. "Official designation, Advanced Physics Research Station. Unofficial designation, a place that doesn't exist." "Understood, sir." "You understand nothing yet, Anderson, but you will." He opened the Humvee's passenger door. "Get in." We drove less than a quarter mile before stopping at what looked like an ordinary maintenance shed. Inside, however, the back wall slid aside to reveal an elevator. Taylor pressed his palm against a scanner, followed by a 6-digit code on a keypad. "You'll be issued credentials tomorrow. For now, stay close." The elevator went down for what felt like too long, 15, maybe 20 seconds of silent dropping before the doors opened onto a hallway that split in 3 directions. The walls were bare concrete painted institutional beige, with color-coded lines running along the floor: red, green, blue. "Follow the blue line for residential quarters," Taylor explained, walking briskly down the green path. "Green for operations and labs. Red for restricted areas. Your clearance currently permits blue and parts of green. Deviate from that, there will be consequences." We passed through 2 security checkpoints, each with armed guards who checked Taylor's ID really carefully, even though they obviously knew who he was. At the second checkpoint, they added a retinal scanner to the ID check. "The facility operates on 24-hour shifts," Taylor continued as we walked. "You'll work 12 on, 12 off, with rotating assignments. Your quarters are small but private. Mess hall serves 4 meals daily to accommodate all shifts. Recreation room has basic amenities. Internet access is monitored and restricted. No external communications without prior approval." The hallway led to a big open area where different paths met up. People wearing lab coats and military uniforms walked between doorways. The bright fluorescent lights from the ceiling made everything super visible. "This is Central," Taylor said. "Main junction of the facility. Most admin offices and conference rooms branch from here." He took me through some double doors labeled Lab Complex Alpha and into a room that was way colder, probably by about 10 degrees. The place was bigger than a basketball court with rows of server banks, monitoring stations, and equipment I had no clue about. Scientists wearing lab coats were bent over screens showing all kinds of data and diagrams. Guards with guns stood along the walls, watching everyone with blank faces. And then I saw it. In the middle of the huge room, sitting on a raised platform, was something I couldn't really name. It was made of metal rings stacked inside each other, each one about 15 feet across, standing up like a gyroscope. Inside the rings were smaller mechanical parts that shined under the lights. The whole thing gave off a soft blue glow that seemed to come from the metal itself. "What is that?" I asked, unable to stop myself. Taylor's expression tightened. "That's above your clearance, Anderson. You'll be working with a related system." He steered me away from the main apparatus toward a roped-off section at the far end of the lab. Here, a much smaller version of the ring system, about 5 feet across, sat on a separate workstation. A thin man with thick glasses and constantly moving hands worked on an open panel on the device's side. "Dr. Higgins," Taylor called. "Your new assistant has arrived." The man stood up too fast and hit his head on something sticking out. He fixed his glasses with his inky fingers and blinked a bunch, like he was having trouble seeing me clearly. Yes, the military physicist. Finally. Dr. Michael Higgins spoke with the rapid-fire delivery of someone whose thoughts outpaced his words. "How much have you been told?" "No, don't answer that. The answer is not enough regardless. Come here. Look at this calibration sequence." Taylor stepped back. "Dr. Higgins will handle your technical orientation. Report to Central at 0700 tomorrow for facility protocols and security briefing. Your quarters are B14. A guard will show you there when you're done here." Before I could respond, Taylor had already turned away. Higgins barely noticed the Major's departure, already pulling me toward the smaller ring device. "This is the monitoring array. Scaled-down version of the primary apparatus, but essential for stabilizing the quantum field harmonics." His words tumbled out like water from a broken dam. "We're getting phase alignment issues during power-up sequences. Your background in mechanical engineering might help us isolate the structural weaknesses causing the deviations." I checked out the device, looking at all the sensors and tools built into the rings. "What exactly are we monitoring, Dr. Higgins?" He stopped, his hands stuck in midair. He looked at the bigger machine, then back to me. "Quantum fluctuations in space-time. He lowered his voice. More than that I can't say yet, but you'll figure it out soon enough. You look capable of connecting dots. For the next 3 hours, Higgins showed me how to do basic maintenance on the monitoring equipment, going over how all the parts work together. He used lots of technical terms but never talked about what the system was actually for. Whenever I asked questions about why we were doing this stuff, he'd just point me to another part or some test we needed to run. By the time a guard came to take me to my room, my brain was overloaded with tech details, and I still had so many questions. The living area was a bit nicer than the labs. Still felt like a facility, but they'd tried to make it comfortable. My room had a twin bed, desk, small bathroom, and barely enough space to move around in. A digital clock on the wall showed the time and date, the only way to know what day it was down here. I sat on the bed and started unpacking my duffel bag with the few things I'd brought. The walls had this low buzzing that you'd stop noticing after a while, but it was definitely there. Probably just machinery, or something else entirely. When I put my hand on the concrete wall, I felt the buzzing had a beat to it. Not just random shaking, but steady, regular. I could hear people talking as they walked by my door. Bigger power spike than yesterday. They're close to breaking through. Higgins keeps saying we need more safeguards. Higgins worries too much. Taylor says we're right on schedule. Their footsteps disappeared, and I was left with bits of their conversation and the constant noise of some big machine running below us. Breaking through to what? I lay back on the narrow bed, looking up at the plain ceiling. This hidden place was buried under hundreds of feet of rock and desert soil. I was stuck in a facility doing something so secret they wouldn't even tell their own staff about it. In the middle of it all was a machine I'd never seen anything like before, humming with power. I'd signed away my right to ask the most important questions. For now, all I could do was watch, learn, and try to figure out what exactly I'd gotten myself into. 3 months passed in the underground maze of Facility 6. The days ran together, marked only by shift changes and the constant noise of machinery. I got used to life in this hidden world, the recycled air that never quite felt fresh, the artificial lighting that made every hour look the same as the last, the quiet footsteps of personnel moving through concrete corridors. My quarters stayed pretty empty even after living here so long. A few technical manuals stacked on the desk, standard issue clothing in the small dresser, and a single photograph of my MIT graduation tucked inside my copy of Feynman's lectures. The vibration in the walls became background noise that I barely noticed anymore. I walked the green-lined path toward Lab Complex Alpha, nodding to the guards who didn't check my credentials as carefully after weeks of seeing my face. The facility ran smoothly. Everyone knew their job and did it right. Dr. Higgins was bent over his workstation when I arrived, hair standing in tufts like he'd been electrocuted. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. He'd been pulling 16-hour shifts for the past week, fueled by a constant stream of coffee that left empty cups scattered across every flat surface. "James," he acknowledged without looking up. "Run the phase diagnostics on the secondary array. Focus on harmonic resonance patterns in the theta band." I dropped my notebook beside the monitoring terminal and started the sequence. After months of working with Michael, I'd figured out what he meant when he gave weird directions and could tell what he needed before he asked. Today he was so nervous I could practically feel it. "Another sleepless night?" I asked, eyes on the calibration readings. "Sleep is inefficient." His fingers clacked against keys, the rhythm uneven and hurried. "Taylor wants results by end of week. Sleep doesn't produce results." The monitoring array turned on under my hands. The concentric rings began rotating, slowly at first, then accelerating until they blurred. Data streamed across my screen, quantum fluctuations, energy spikes, radiation levels. After 3 months, I understood enough to be useful, but still not enough to grasp the full scope of what we were doing. Michael paused suddenly, glanced at the guard stationed by the door, then wheeled his chair closer to mine. The squeak of rubber against polished concrete seemed too loud in the quiet lab. "You've been here long enough," he said, voice lowered. Smart enough to have questions, observant enough to know something's off. I continued adjusting parameters, keeping my expression neutral. I've been wondering when we'd have this conversation. What do you think we're doing here, James? The question hung between us. I thought about my answer carefully, knowing it mattered. Based on the equipment configurations and energy readings, I kept my voice level. We're trying to breach something, a barrier. The math suggests dimensional harmonics rather than just spatial ones. Michael's mouth twitched. Good. Very good. He tapped a command that triggered a simulation on my screen, multiple planes representing different realities, with our machine creating a tunnel between them. Think of it like changing TV channels, he explained, fingers tracing the visualization. Except each channel is a different version of our world. Parallel realities existing simultaneously, separated by quantum barriers. The image spun around, showing how the rings in the main device made patterns that could supposedly weaken those barriers. And we're trying to punch through, I said. To what end? Michael's eyes darted around again. Officially? Scientific discovery, new resources, technological advancement. He hesitated. The project started as theoretical physics, pure research. Then the military applications became apparent. Like what? Imagine deploying troops directly into enemy territory through a dimensional gateway, or extracting resources from an alternate Earth without environmental consequences to our own. His voice dropped further. But that's all secondary now. Taylor's obsessed with making first contact. The data stream spiked suddenly. Both our heads snapped toward the readings. Hold that thought, Michael said, all business again. Recalibrate the tertiary sensors. We're getting something. I adjusted the equipment, making the energy spikes clearer. The pattern wasn't random. It had a steady rhythm to it. For the next 3 hours, we worked in quiet, capturing and analyzing each change. By the time we finished, my back hurt from hunching over the terminal. Michael sat back, pushing his glasses up to rub his eyes. Good work today, he said. We're making progress. These signatures match theoretical predictions for transdimensional energy patterns. In English? We're detecting the other side. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. For the first time, we're actually seeing through. I finally got how serious this was. Not theoretical anymore. Real. I should report these findings, Michael said, gathering his notes. Get some rest. Don't mention this conversation to anyone, especially Taylor. I nodded, watching him rush toward the lab exit with papers pressed against his chest. The mess hall was the center of the facility's social life, the one place where rank seemed to matter less than in the strict work areas. Scientists sat alongside security personnel. Administrative staff mingled with technicians. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, with the clatter of trays and murmur of conversation, it almost felt normal. I loaded my tray with something that looked like beef stroganoff and looked around the room. Thomas Smith waved from a corner table, his broad grin visible from across the hall. Anderson, over here. I walked between the tables to get to him. In the last 2 months, Thomas and I had gotten pretty friendly, at least as much as we could in such a strict place. We'd worked security shifts together enough times that we were comfortable around each other, the way guys get when they share boring jobs. You look like hell, he said as I sat down. Thanks. I feel even better than I look. Tom laughed, and it was real, not like the fake polite talk that filled most conversations here. He had a way of cutting through the BS that I really liked. Higgins working you to death again? He asked between bites of mashed potatoes. The man doesn't understand human limitations. I rubbed my neck. Or the need for sleep. Scientists, Tom snorted. My dad was a physicist at Berkeley. Used to forget I existed during big projects. He pointed his fork at me. Though whatever you guys are doing with that crazy spinning thing seems worth losing sleep over. I avoided the implied question. After 3 months, I just knew the unwritten rules of Facility 6. Don't share info, keep quiet, only tell people what they need to know. Instead, I changed the subject. How was perimeter duty? Dull as dirt. Tom leaned forward. But I did hear something interesting during the shift change. Taylor's been making calls to Washington all day. Word is, we're close to some kind of breakthrough. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Michael's excited readings from today suddenly took on new significance. Breakthrough, I repeated. Any details? Above my pay grade. Tom shrugged. But the texts and communications were buzzing. Whatever's happening, it's soon. The conversation moved to regular stuff. The bad coffee, the stale air, Tom's idea that the cook was making meals worse on purpose just to mess with us. Just normal complaints to pass the time. After dinner, I went to the small rec room where people hung out when they weren't working. There was a pool table in the middle, some beat-up couches, and a TV playing movies that management had okayed. Tom jumped into a card game that was already going while I picked up an old paperback someone had left on the table. Being stuck with the same people for months created weird bonds. After 3 months, I knew everyone's face, tons of names, and could pretty much guess what each person would do next. We weren't friends exactly, but sharing this place made us feel weirdly close anyway. My watch showed 10:30 when the intercom crackled to life. All research personnel report to conference room A immediately. All research personnel to conference room A. Scientists scattered around the room exchanged glances before setting down drinks and books. I caught Michael's eye as he passed. He'd been sitting alone in the corner, barely touching his coffee. Something in his expression worried me. "What's happening?" I asked, falling into step beside him. "Taylor's calling a meeting." His voice held none of its usual energy. "You should come too. You're part of the team now." Conference room A filled quickly with bleary-eyed scientists and technicians. Major Taylor stood at the head of the long table, back straight, face blank as usual. But something about how he stood showed he was trying to hide his excitement. Once the room filled, Taylor cleared his throat. Everyone stopped talking right away. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice clipped and formal. "At 15:43 hours today, our monitoring equipment detected a sustained quantum resonance pattern consistent with cross-dimensional contact." The room erupted in whispers. Taylor raised a hand, silencing them. "In simple terms, we have established initial contact with another reality. For the first time in human history, we have proof that parallel dimensions exist, and more importantly, that we can reach them." Scientists around me broke into spontaneous applause. A technician from the night shift actually whooped. The tension that had built over months of grueling work dissolved into elation and relief. I didn't join the celebration. My eyes found Michael standing against the back wall. While everyone around him smiled and shook hands, his face remained drawn, almost sick with worry. Our eyes met across the room. He gave a slight shake of his head. Taylor continued once the noise died down. "This is just the beginning. Tomorrow we increase power to the main apparatus for deeper scanning. Full activation tests begin at 0800. All shifts are temporarily suspended. I want every team member present." The announcement triggered another round of excitement. Taylor allowed it briefly before dismissing everyone. As the room emptied, I noticed him beckoning Michael to stay behind. I lingered near the door, pretending to check my notes until the room cleared. "Concerned about the energy signatures, sir," Michael was saying, his back to me. "They don't match our projections. These patterns suggest..." "They suggest success, Doctor." Taylor's voice cut like a blade. "After millions in funding and years of delays, we finally have results. Washington is ecstatic." "But the patterns indicate sentience," Michael insisted. "We're not just looking at empty space on the other side. There's something there, something active, and we don't understand. That's precisely the point of the project." Taylor interrupted. "Discovery, contact. You should be celebrating instead of finding new problems." I slipped away before anyone saw me, thinking about what Michael had said. Sentience. Something active. It made me really nervous to think about. The mess hall was packed even though it was late. News of the breakthrough had everyone excited and messed up their normal schedules. I found Michael sitting alone in the corner looking at his cold coffee. He was hunched over like he was really tired. When I sat across from him, he didn't look up right away. I've got questions, I said quietly. I bet you do. He pushed the untouched coffee aside, along with concerns if you've been paying attention. The sentience you mentioned to Taylor. Michael looked around, then leaned forward. The energy signatures we detected today, they're not random, not background radiation or quantum noise. He put his hands on the table. They're structured, complex, responsive. Responsive? The word caught me. What does that mean exactly? When we initiated the pulse sequence, the patterns changed. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They adapted to our probe, like something noticed us looking and looked back. I felt sick to my stomach. And Taylor doesn't care? Taylor sees what he wants to see. A successful project. A career advancement. Michael's knuckles whitened as he pressed harder against the table. We're moving too fast. The readings suggest this reality isn't empty. Far from it. We need weeks, maybe months of careful observation before attempting anything like full activation. Then why? Politics. He spat the word. Funding cycles, military deadlines. Taylor's promised Washington results and now he needs to deliver before someone pulls the plug. The noise from the mess hall seemed to fade as his words hit me. All the happy chatter suddenly felt dumb, like no one realized how dangerous things really were. What exactly are you worried might happen? I asked. Michael opened his mouth to answer, then his eyes fixed on something over my shoulder. His expression suddenly went blank. Dr. Higgins. Major Taylor's voice came from directly behind me. Spreading concerns among junior personnel instead of addressing them through proper channels? I turned to find Taylor standing there, his straight posture looking scarier than if he'd just yelled at me. Sir, I was just... Dismissed Anderson. Taylor's eyes never left Michael. Dr. Higgins and I need to continue our discussion in private. Michael stood up, his hands shaking a little as he tried to look composed. Of course, Major. We should review the safety protocols for tomorrow's test anyway. As they walked away, Michael glanced back at me with an expression I couldn't fully interpret. Warning, resignation, and something that might have been apology. I stayed at the table long after they left. The party kept going around me, but it felt far away. The machine's vibration felt stronger tonight, coming up through the floor under my feet. Or maybe I was just noticing it more now, knowing what it meant. A window between worlds, a door about to be opened. The next morning, I showed up for my shift early. The hallways were busy with people getting ready for the full activation test. Technicians hurried between stations, carrying equipment and checking connections. Security guards stood extra alert, posted at important spots throughout the facility. I found Michael in Lab Complex Alpha, bent over a terminal with papers covering every surface. His lab coat had fresh coffee stains and his hair was sticking out all over. When I got close, I could smell sweat and tell he hadn't rested in hours. Did you sleep at all? I asked, though the answer was obvious. Michael looked up, blinking like he didn't know who I was. His eyes were bloodshot with red veins all through the whites. They want full activation today, he whispered, voice hoarse. I can't stop it. I've tried every objection, every delay tactic. Taylor has Washington's backing. He shuffled through his papers, hands shaking slightly. I've changed the safety protocols as much as they'll allow, but it's not enough. Not nearly enough. What happens during full activation? I asked. Theoretically, we create a sustained aperture between realities. He rubbed his eyes. A window becomes a door, but the power requirements are enormous and the quantum stability models are based on assumptions we haven't properly tested. I looked at the main machine across the lab. Technicians were all over it, making final adjustments to the huge rings. The blue light was brighter today, almost pulsing with energy. Michael, I said, using his first name deliberately. What are you not saying? He looked at me, then reached into his lab coat pocket and pressed a small key into my palm. I've left notes in my quarters. Drawer in the desk, bottom compartment, if anything happens. He swallowed hard, just in case. The gesture made me feel really cold all over. You're really that worried? I hope I'm wrong. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Probably just paranoia from sleep deprivation, but better safe than sorry, right? The lab doors swung open as Major Taylor entered, surrounded by an entourage of officials I didn't recognize, men in expensive suits carrying tablets and looking important. The time for private conversation had ended. "Places, everyone," Taylor announced. "Full activation sequence begins in 30 minutes. This is what we've all been working toward." Michael squeezed my shoulder before going to his station. The key felt strangely heavy in my hand, not because of its actual weight, but because of what it meant. I put it in my pocket and took my spot by the monitors, watching everyone get ready to open a doorway to another world. The big rings on the machine started turning slowly, picking up speed. Through the window, I saw people filing into the control room. The machine got louder, and I could feel the vibrations coming up through the floor. Whatever was waiting for us on the other side, we were about to see it directly. I remembered what Michael told me about those weird energy patterns that seemed to watch us back, and all the stuff we still didn't understand. The countdown started. 9, 8, 7. The computer voice played through the main lab over the speakers. I held onto my console so tight my knuckles turned white. Most people in the control room looked super tense, trying to act normal while knowing we might be making history, or maybe screwing up really badly. 6, 5, 4. Taylor stood at the central platform with his hands behind his back. He looked completely confident. Near the back wall, Michael was hunched over his station, looking quickly between multiple screens while his fingers stayed ready above an emergency shutdown sequence he wasn't authorized to use. 3, 2, 1. The main apparatus started up. The massive concentric rings began spinning, slowly at first, then faster until they blurred together. Blue energy sparked between the circles, jumping around like crazy. The floor under my feet shook more and more, and even the concrete seemed to buzz with whatever forces we were messing with. "Primary containment stable?" someone called out. "Quantum field harmonics approaching threshold." Technicians called out readings from around the room, their voices talking over each other. I watched the secondary monitors, tracking energy levels that went way higher than our previous tests. The air in the lab felt stuffy, smelling like ozone with that metallic taste you get from electricity. "Breach point approaching," Michael announced, his voice tight. "Field integrity at 87%. The central rings spun faster. The blue glow got brighter, pulsing in a rhythm that looked planned instead of random. I squinted at the space inside the innermost ring where everything looked bendy and blurry. 73%, Michael called, louder now. Power fluctuations in the tertiary grid. Taylor turned toward him. "Compensate and continue, Doctor." "Sir, these readings suggest continue." The command shut down any further objection. Michael's shoulders slumped as he made the adjustments. Around the room, people's faces showed both excitement and worry. Tom caught my eye from his spot by the door and gave me a questioning look. I gave him a quick shrug back. I had no idea what was happening now. The rings spun faster than I thought possible. The machine made a sound I'd never heard before, a high-pitched whine that went right through our headphones and into our skulls. Several technicians winced and pressed their hands against their ears, which didn't help at all. "Breach imminent!" Michael shouted over the noise. "Field integrity at critical threshold." In the middle of the inner ring, space began to bend. The air twisted and pulled in weird ways. The blue energy got smaller and tighter until it was just a tiny dot of light in the center. You shouldn't have been able to see it, but it was brighter than anything else in the room. "We have contact!" someone yelled. "Dimensional breach confirmed!" The point got super bright. My vision filled with spots as I tried to look away. The whine from the machine got higher, became a shriek that made my teeth vibrate and my head hurt. "Power surge detected," Michael shouted, panic breaking through his scientific detachment. "Containment fields destabilizing. We need to abort." Taylor stepped toward the central console. "No, maintain current parameters." "The readings are off the charts," Michael began. He never finished. The pinprick of light blew up in a silent flash that drowned out all other light. For a split second, the whole lab lit up super bright. It hurt to look at. Then the blast hit. It knocked me back hard, pushing all the air out of my lungs and throwing me off my feet. I crashed into something behind me. Could have been a wall or a console, I couldn't tell. People flew across the room. Equipment fell to the floor. Alarms went off, then stopped when the power went out. Everything went black. For a few seconds, I could only hear the ringing in my ears and the sound of broken glass settling. Then the backup generators started up, filling the lab with dim red light that made everything look scary. I got up, tasting blood where I'd bit my tongue. Papers and junk covered the floor. Computer screens were broken. The giant rings of the main machine had stopped spinning but still made a noise with leftover energy, with sparks jumping between them. "Status report," Taylor called, somehow still standing. Blood trickled from his nose, stark black in the red lighting. Groans answered him as people struggled to their feet. I saw a technician lying awkwardly against an overturned chair and moved to help. The young man had a nasty cut across his forehead. "Can you stand?" I asked, reaching for his arm. He turned toward me, and the words died in my throat. Something was wrong with his face. Beneath the blood from his head wound, his skin was moving in weird ways. His cheek bulged outward, then sank, then bulged again in a different spot. His eyes widened, not with pain but with pure terror. "Help," he whispered. His voice bubbled as if speaking through liquid. "Something's..." Phillips's back suddenly bent in a way that didn't look human. He made a wet, tearing noise like ripping fabric. His skin started to move and stretch all over. I stumbled backward, my hip hitting a console. "Medical!" I shouted. "We need medical here." But no one came. Around the room, others were changing too. A woman by the main controls grabbed at her throat as her jawline stretched, making her face look completely wrong. A security guard near the door fell to his knees, arms twisting in impossible ways, bones clearly moving under his skin. "What's happening?" Taylor demanded, turning in a slow circle, witnessing the horror unfolding throughout his command. For the first time, his perfect composure fractured, eyes widening as he struggled to process what he saw. I searched desperately for Michael, found him slumped over his console, blood pooling beneath his head from where he'd struck it during the blast. He wasn't moving, wasn't changing either. "Michael!" I called, starting toward him. A hand closed around my ankle. Phillips was on the floor with fingers that had grown twice their normal length. His skin looked paper thin across his swollen knuckles. His face was all wrong now. Features that should have been even were all jumbled up on his misshapen skull. "Cold," Phillips gurgled through a mouth that now sat near his left ear. "So cold inside." I kicked free. The overhead lights flickered as emergency power tried to keep the dim red glow going. In the blinking light, people changing looked even worse. Bodies turning into something else like a choppy horror movie. I spotted someone stumbling through the chaos. Tom, making his way toward me. I felt so happy to see him until he stepped into a patch of light. The bottom half of his face had caved in, his cheekbones and jaw all melted together into a smooth surface. But his eyes were still his, the same friendly blue ones I'd seen in the cafeteria so many times. Those eyes now looked full of pain and confusion as he reached for me. "James," he managed through a mouth that barely existed anymore. "Help. Me." His uniform ripped as his body started to change. His shoulders got wider and his waist got skinnier. The fabric tore at the seams. His right arm grew longer, his fingers breaking apart and turning into something with way too many joints. "Tom," I whispered, frozen in place. "Jesus, Tom." He lurched forward another step. "Hurts. Inside feels wrong." The words slurred as his mouth continued its creepy transformation. Then his eyes changed. The blue irises expanded, then darkened, the color bleeding outward until the entire socket filled with glossy blackness. His head tilted at a weird angle, like a curious animal studying prey. "James," he said again, but the voice sounded wrong now. Hollow, as if coming from somewhere deep inside rather than from his throat. "James, not alone now." He jumped at me crazy fast. I dodged on instinct, diving sideways as he smashed into the console where I'd been standing. Metal bent from the hit. Tom, or what used to be Tom, got up way too quickly, moving on legs that bent in weird and scary ways. I grabbed something solid, a heavy wrench left by the repair guys. Tom ran at me again, arms stretched out way too long. I swung without thinking, no time to stop or show mercy. The wrench hit with a wet thud. Tom's weird head snapped sideways at an angle that would break any normal neck. He stumbled, then fell to the floor. I stood over him, wrench still up, breathing hard. On the ground, Tom's body kept changing, skin moving, limbs twisting, even though he was knocked out and couldn't feel the pain. Whatever this change was, it didn't stop when he died. Screams rang through the facility now, coming from hallways and nearby labs. The disaster wasn't just in the main chamber. Looking back toward the central machine, I saw the rings still sparking with leftover energy. The space between them no longer showed the tiny dot of light, but the air there still looked wrong, like looking through bent glass. Taylor was gone. So were most of the people who could still move by themselves. Those left were either dead, knocked out like Michael, or changing. I had to get out. The main doors were partly open, emergency systems having unlocked them when power went out. Beyond was the hallway leading back to Central. I looked one last time at Michael slumped over, wishing I could check if he was alive, knowing I didn't have time. The key he'd given me pressed against my leg through my pocket. His room, his notes. Whatever he'd been scared might happen was happening all around me. I held the wrench tighter and ran. The hallways had turned into a nightmare maze. Red emergency lights made bright spots with pitch black between them. I ran through, trying not to look at the shapes I passed. Coworkers twisted into monsters, some still changing, others completely changed into things that hardly looked human. A man in a lab coat crawled on the ceiling, spine bent backward, neck stretched to twice its normal length. He made a hissing sound as I ran under him, like steam from a broken pipe. I didn't look up, didn't slow down. The blue line. I needed to follow the blue line to the living area. The floor markings were hard to see in the dim light, but I tracked them through Central and into the east wing. Behind me I heard noises. Not human screams anymore, but something else. Clicking, rustling, wet sounds like footsteps in mud. I passed a security desk. The guard station was empty, the thick glass window broken outward. Blood streaked the glass pieces still stuck in the frame. A door was ahead. Storage room B7 according to the sign. I pulled it open and slipped inside, closing it behind me. My hands shook as I locked it, then dragged a heavy metal shelf in front of the entrance. The room had maintenance stuff, tools, parts for the air system, boxes of light bulbs, no windows. A single emergency light gave off weak light from a corner. I fell against the far wall, sliding down until I sat on the cold concrete, still holding the wrench tight. For the first time since the flash, I had time to think, to process. The images played again in my head. Phillips's melting face, the woman's stretched jaw, Tom's empty black eyes. My friend. I'd killed my friend. No, not Tom, not anymore. Whatever was happening to him, the person I knew was already gone. Through the door, I heard them moving in the hallway. Shuffling steps, scraping sounds. Something heavy dragged across the floor. Sometimes a noise that might have been talking, messed up words forced through weird vocal cords. I pressed my hands against my ears but couldn't block it out. Time stretched on, marked only by my racing heart and the slowly fading sounds from outside. Minutes or hours. I couldn't tell which passed as I sat in that dim storage room, trying to make sense of what made no sense. Michael had known, had been scared of exactly this. The intelligence he found on the other side wasn't friendly aliens or other humans. It had been, what? Parasites? Invaders? Something that could remake human bodies from the inside. I remembered his words. They adapted to our probe, like something noticed us looking and looked back. We hadn't just opened a window to another reality. We'd opened a door, and something had walked through. Eventually, the noises outside stopped. I waited longer, counting my breaths until I reached 500. Still nothing. Either the changed people had left, or I couldn't stay in the storage room forever. Michael's key pressed against my leg, reminding me I had work to do. His room would have answers. If he'd left notes, maybe they would explain what happened, what to do next. I moved the shelf as quietly as possible and put my ear to the door. Nothing. Taking a deep breath, I turned the handle and opened it a crack. The hallway was empty in both directions. The emergency lights still gave off their red glow, but the space between them seemed darker somehow, deeper than normal shadow. I stepped out, wrench raised, and started walking toward the living area. The facility felt wrong, not just the obvious wrongness of disaster, but something more basic. The air felt heavier. The shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. Even the constant machine noise that I'd gotten used to over months had changed pitch, becoming off-key and uneven. I passed open doorways, quickly glancing into each room before moving on. Labs sat empty, equipment still running on backup power. Offices empty except for papers thrown across the floor. A break room with coffee cups knocked over, dark liquid pooling on tables and dripping to the floor. No bodies. Nowhere. Those who died should have stayed where they fell. Those who changed, where had they gone? I turned a corner and stopped. The hallway ahead showed signs of violence. Deep scratches in the walls, ceiling panels torn down. A trail of dark stuff smeared along the floor. Not blood, too black, too thick, with an oily shine that caught the red light. The trail led toward the central lab, back the way I had come. I stepped carefully around it, following the blue line deeper into the facility. After what felt like miles of creepy hallways, I reached the living wing. Michael's room was in Section D, near the other senior researchers. Room D14. The door was partly open. I came up carefully, wrench ready, pushed the door wider with my foot. Inside, the room looked torn apart, drawers pulled out, papers thrown across the bed and floor, personal stuff knocked from shelves. Someone had searched it already. Taylor, or something else? I went in anyway, checking for any danger before kneeling beside the desk. The drawer Michael had mentioned hung open, its contents dumped out. I ran my fingers along the inside, feeling for a hidden spot. My nail caught on a seam at the back. I put the key Michael had given me into what looked like a screw hole. It turned with a soft click, and a false bottom popped up, showing a space underneath. Inside was a sealed envelope. I grabbed it, along with a small portable hard drive taped to the envelope, and stuffed both into my pocket. Whatever information Michael had hidden, I couldn't risk reading it here. I needed somewhere safer. As I stood to leave, movement flashed in the corner of my eye, a shadow passing the open doorway. I froze, barely breathing, wrench ready to swing. Nothing followed. After 30 seconds of complete stillness, I crept to the door and looked out. The hallway was empty in both directions, yet I felt like someone was watching me. I picked a direction, away from Central, deeper into the living wing where I might find another place to hide and read Michael's notes. The facility stayed weirdly quiet as I moved through it. No alarms, no voices over the speakers announcing evacuation plans or emergency steps. Just the irregular hum of damaged systems and my own careful footsteps. I found what I needed 3 hallways later, a janitor's closet with a strong lock. Inside, I stuck a mop handle under the door handle just to be sure, then sat on the floor and pulled out the envelope. Michael's handwriting covered the front. In case of breach, the truth. My fingers shook as I tore it open. The light in the closet was too dim to read by. I grabbed my phone, turned on its flashlight, and pointed it toward the pages covered in writing. The first words hit me hard. By the time you read this, they'll already be among us. My hands trembled as I read the first line of Michael's letter again. By the time you read this, they'll already be among us. I pressed my back against the cold concrete wall of the janitor closet. I used my phone's flashlight to see in the cramped space as I continued reading. James, Michael's letter continued, I've been tracking anomalies in the quantum field for weeks. The patterns shouldn't exist. They're organized, complex, evidence of intelligence, but not human intelligence, not even close. The handwriting got messier with each paragraph, like Michael was running out of time. The machine doesn't just open a window to another reality. It creates a bridge. and they've been waiting on the other side. Not alternate humans, as Taylor believes, but entities that exist in the spaces between realities. They lack physical form in their natural state. They need hosts. A distant crash rang out through the facility. I turned off the light and held my breath, waiting in the darkness. 1, 2, 3. When nothing followed, I turned the light back on and went back to the letter. Taylor dismissed my concerns, pushed for faster progress. Washington wants results, but the math doesn't lie. The dimensional membrane is too thin now. Even without full activation, they might find ways through. Small incursions. They learn quickly. I flipped to the next page. Michael had included equations, diagrams of brainwave patterns, and comparative analyses of what he called native versus foreign biosignatures. I've been developing detection methods. The hard drive contains all my data. They can take our forms, but their neural patterns remain distinct, if you know what to look for. I've hidden a prototype scanner in the maintenance shaft behind panel M17. The next page contained technical instructions for building and operating the scanner. I tucked it back into the envelope, my throat dry. I needed water, food, time to process what I was reading. More importantly, I needed to know if anyone else had survived unchanged. I waited another hour in that closet, listening to how quiet the facility was. Eventually, hunger drove me out. I moved through the corridors carefully, wrench still clutched in my hand, following the green line toward the mess hall. The facility felt off in ways beyond the obvious disaster. The air felt too heavy when I breathed. The shadows looked too dark. Even the emergency lights seemed dimmer, like the power was slowly running out. I passed a wall clock stuck at 10:17, its second hand twitching back and forth but unable to move forward. My watch still worked. Almost 18 hours had passed since the breach. I'd lost track of time in that closet, exhaustion and shock making minutes feel like hours. The mess hall doors stood open. Inside, chairs were knocked over. Food trays lay across tables and floor. A pot of coffee had boiled dry on a burner, leaving a burnt metal smell that cut through the weird chemical smell in the air. No bodies. Again. I found protein bars in a storage cabinet, bottles of water in a refrigerator that still made noise with emergency power. I stuffed some in my pockets, then tore into one bar, eating slowly even though I was starving. My brain kept cycling through the same useless questions. Where had everyone gone? How many had changed? Were there others like me, hiding in closets and storage rooms? The hard drive in my pocket held answers, but I needed a working computer. Most terminals would be locked, but I knew one that wouldn't be. My own station in Lab Complex Beta, where I'd been studying the monitoring array for the past 3 months. If emergency power still fed that section, I might access the system. The journey through the facility took twice as long as it should have. I moved carefully, avoiding open spaces, sticking to shadows. Twice I ducked into doorways when I heard movement, once just shuffling, like something being dragged, and once a wet, slapping sound that didn't match any footsteps I'd ever heard. Lab Complex Beta looked weirdly untouched compared to Alpha. Equipment sat on workbenches. Papers were in neat stacks. Only the emergency lighting and the weird smell of ozone suggested anything had gone wrong. My terminal powered up when I touched the keyboard. The screen lit up the dark lab with blue light, making me feel exposed. I worked quickly, copying files from Michael's hard drive while checking the room every few seconds. Most files were locked behind encryption, but Michael had included passcodes in his letter. I opened what I could. Research notes, theoretical models, brainwave comparisons. The science went over my head, but the meaning was clear. Michael had been tracking weird stuff for months before the breach, signs that something was already affecting our reality, pushing between dimensions. One video file caught my attention. For James. I clicked it. Michael's face filled the screen, haggard and unshaven. He spoke in a low, urgent whisper. "James, if you're seeing this, I didn't make it. The breach is happening today. I tried to stop it, but Taylor has Washington's backing. I've reprogrammed the security cams to archive footage to this partition. Evidence of what happens. I've also sabotaged the generator to shut down after the initial breach. It won't stop what comes through, but it might prevent a full invasion." He rubbed his eyes, looking even more exhausted than when I'd last seen him. "They take our forms, our memories, perfect mimics but not perfect copies. There are tells if you know to look, micro-expressions, pupil reactions, small cognitive glitches. The scanner will help. Trust no one, James. Get to the surface. Tell someone who will listen." The video cut off. I sat frozen, Michael's words sinking in. The security footage. He mentioned archive security footage. I navigated through the system, following the breadcrumb trail Michael had left. Found the files buried in a partition normally used for backup logs. Dozens of video clips, organized by camera location and timestamp. All from yesterday, covering the minutes after the breach. I selected the main lab camera first. The footage showed right after the containment failure with emergency lights on and people trying to get up in all the mess. The camera caught most of the room, including the main device where the rings were still shaking. The space between them looked weird and distorted. I watched as Taylor picked himself up, barking orders no one followed. Watched Michael slumped unconscious over his console. Watched as one by one, people began to change. It started with small tremors like muscle spasms. Then they had full-on seizures. Their bodies bent in weird ways. Their skin moved like something was under it. Their arms and legs got longer, and their faces changed. The camera recorded all of it in clear detail. But the worst came after the transformations completed. The changed beings didn't just rampage mindlessly. They communicated, gathered, organized. I watched them move through the lab, checking each fallen body. They dragged the ones still alive toward the machine. The unconscious people just disappeared into the distorted space. Then the changed ones turned toward the camera, their black eyes looking right at the lens. The footage cut to static. I selected another clip, Hallway B, leading from the main lab toward Central. More of the changed beings dragged bodies through the corridor, not just toward the machine this time. Some headed for the elevator. Every video showed the same thing. The changed beings were clearing out the facility, taking both dead and unconscious people. Some videos showed the transformed staff using computers, looking at data, and talking on radios. They weren't just acting crazy, they had a plan. The last clip showed the command center 6 hours after the breach. Taylor stood at the main console, back to the camera. He turned, and I nearly fell from my chair. His face looked completely normal, without any of the ugly changes I'd seen in others. But his eyes were solid black and the console lights bounced off them. He spoke into a radio, voice normal. "Facility secured, beginning evacuation procedures, phase 2 underway." The screen went dark. I sat in the empty lab, my heart racing. Taylor had changed, but he looked almost normal. How many others might be like that, changed inside but looking human on the outside? I couldn't sleep that night. I locked myself in a storage room near the central junction, where I could escape in different directions if needed. I felt so tired, but whenever I closed my eyes, I saw Tom's messed up face, Phillips's melting skin, and Taylor's black stare. By my watch, morning arrived, though it meant nothing in the windowless underground. I forced myself to eat another protein bar, drink water, keep moving. I had to find the scanner Michael mentioned. Panel M17 would be in the maintenance section, lower level. Going down the stairs was creepy. The lights flickered more here, making shadows jump around and trick my eyes. My footsteps echoed even though I tried to be quiet. Maintenance stretched in a confusing grid of narrow passages filled with pipes, ductwork, and electrical conduits. The panel numbering system made no sense to me. M22 sat beside M5, across from M43. I spent an hour searching before finding M17 tucked in a corner behind a massive air filtration unit. The panel came loose easily. Behind it, wrapped in oilcloth, lay what looked like a modified tablet connected to a small box covered in antenna arrays and sensor pads. A handwritten note taped to the screen read, "Charge for 30 minutes before use. Range, 15 feet." I found a working outlet and plugged it in as instructed, then checked Michael's notes on how to use it. The device measured subtle electromagnetic variances in brain activity, detecting patterns that didn't match human norms. It wouldn't work through walls, needed the subject to stay pretty still, and drain battery quickly, but it was better than nothing. After charging, I powered it up. The screen showed a simple interface, a circular radar display with distance markers. I pointed it at myself first. The reading came back green with pattern match, human 99.7%. I tucked the scanner into my belt and kept exploring. According to my watch, I was starting my second day in the abandoned facility. I was getting really hungry now, and my throat was dry even with the water I had been saving. The lower levels revealed nothing new, more empty corridors, more abandoned workstations. I worked my way up floor by floor, scanning for supplies, survivors, information. Found none of the three. By late afternoon, I reached Lab Complex Alpha again, the space where everything had gone wrong. The main device was quiet now, with the rings not moving. But as I watched, blue energy still sometimes jumped between them, like static electricity before disappearing. The dimensional tear had closed, but not all the way. Something permanent had been left behind in reality. I approached cautiously, scanner held before me. The readings spiked near the machine. Red warnings flashed across the screen, detecting patterns that matched neither human nor anything in its database. Background radiation, perhaps, or something worse. Michael's body was gone, like all the others. His workstation remained, though, and I searched it thoroughly. Found nothing new except a single sheet of paper tucked beneath the keyboard, dated and time-stamped just minutes before the activation sequence. They're coming through. The resonance patterns are unmistakable now. I've done what I can. The generator will fail after initial contact, preventing full manifestation. But some will get through. God help us if they reach the surface. Remember, they look just like us now. Trust no one. Find the scanner. Get out. M. I folded the note carefully and added it to the envelope with his other materials. The scanner suddenly beeped. Movement detected at the edge of its range. I ducked behind a console, holding my breath as I watched the display. A signal appeared at the 15-foot mark, slowly crossing the lab's entrance. The pattern identifier flashed between red and yellow, unable to classify what it detected. Not human. Not like anything in its database. I froze, barely breathing, until the signal moved out of range. Whatever it was, it didn't come into the lab. Realizing those creatures were still in the building with me made sweat run down my back. 2 days. I'd spent 2 days in this underground nightmare. It couldn't continue. I needed to reach the surface, find help, warn someone about what had happened here, what might still be happening. I grabbed what supplies I could carry: food, water, the scanner, Michael's research materials, a tactical flashlight from a security station. Stuffed it all into a duffel bag I found in the locker room. To get to the surface, I had to use either the main elevator in Central or find an emergency stairwell. The elevator would be faster but riskier, noisy and maybe not even working. The stairs would be tiring but safer. I chose the stairs. The emergency exit map showed a stairwell at the north end of the building for evacuations during fires or power outages. 27 flights to the surface. Each step got me closer to daylight, but made it more likely I'd bump into whatever was still hiding in the building. I climbed super slow, stopping at each landing and peeking around corners. The air got less filtered as I went up, dusty like no one had been there in a while. By the time I got to the upper levels, my shirt was soaked with sweat, though it wasn't even hot. The door to the surface level had a warning: restricted area, authorized personnel only. Pretty funny considering. I pushed through into a plain concrete hallway leading to what looked like a security checkpoint. The guard station was empty. Computer screens showed login prompts, coffee cups still half full on the desk. Through the bulletproof glass window I could see the main entrance, a heavy metal door partly open, with daylight coming through the gap. The sight of real daylight after days underground hit me hard. I wanted to sprint toward it and burst outside. Instead, I moved forward slowly, checking the security station first. The monitors showed camera feeds from around the outside, fence lines, the helicopter pad, the main gate half a mile away. All empty. No movement, no people, just desert and mountains as far as I could see. I moved past the station toward the exit, pushing the door open wider. Fresh air rushed in, bringing the smell of dust and sage. After the stale air of the facility, it made my head spin. The outside security area was just a small concrete pad around a metal shed, the facility's cover from above. A chain-link fence topped with razor wire surrounded the immediate area. Beyond that, dirt roads went in 3 directions. The parking area that used to have dozens of vehicles was now empty. The hard-packed dirt showed tire marks my military training helped me understand. Tracks from heavy trucks and lighter vehicles, all heading away from the facility in different directions. Fresh tracks, no more than a day old. They had left, all of them, gone into the world outside. I dropped to my knees just outside the door, with the Nevada sun beating down on my face. After the dim light underground, the brightness hurt my eyes, but I couldn't look away. The empty desert made everything I'd seen feel like a bad dream. Out here under the bright sky, it all felt like something I should just wake up from. But the scanner on my belt, the documents in my bag, the memories stuck in my head, these were all too real. I stood up again, covering my eyes as I looked at the horizon. Civilization was somewhere out there. People who knew nothing about holes between dimensions or things that could look human. People I needed to warn. But who would believe me? A wild-eyed man with classified documents and conspiracy theories about body snatchers. I'd be dismissed as crazy, maybe even locked up as a security risk. And even if I found someone who would listen, how could I know they were still human? How could I trust anyone when the enemy had the same faces as people I knew? The transformed beings had escaped into the world, wearing the faces of my former colleagues. They had Taylor's authority, the scientist's knowledge, the security personnel's training. They had access to government channels, military resources, scientific credibility, and they had a head start. I shouldered my bag and began walking toward the main gate. The sun beat down on my back, my shadow falling ahead of me on the cracked ground. I had no vehicle, limited supplies, and an impossible job to do. But I had one thing they didn't expect: knowledge of what they were. Michael had made sure of that with his hidden notes and scanner. It wasn't much against whatever plans they had started, but it was something. 1 foot in front of the other, 1 mile at a time. I would reach civilization, find allies if they existed, expose the truth if I could. The world had changed completely 2 days ago when that machine broke through the walls between realities. Most people just didn't know it yet.